What is good, everybody? Welcome to another Gold Standard Podcast Network production. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera here with a very special guest. You know him from the Gojo podcast, Mike Golic Jr. What's up, Mike?
Stats, what's going on, man? Good to see you.
You too. You just had me on your show, so I appreciate you returning the favor, although I was very upset because I found out in the episode you had me on, you talked about The Last of Us, and you didn't ask me about it. What's going on?
I really, that was a bad job doing the scouting report on me to not lump you in on that. You would have made it a better, smarter conversation. And I'm just always happy. I'm like the fungus in the show. Anytime someone else is talking about the show, I get the message beamed up through me and we're all alerted.
Here's how we know it's a really good show. When they do one episode that introduces two new characters and you would immediately watch a whole show on those two characters, that's a damn good show.
It really has been incredible so far. And, you know, they had the highest week 1 to week 2 jump in viewership in HBO history, which is a huge testament to how word of mouth, has gotten that. Appointment viewing seems back on Sunday nights, but you're absolutely right. For that to also be the episode that's the biggest departure from the video game so far and to be that big a win, chef's kiss. They're killing it.
Yeah, absolutely must watch. It's good to have something on Sundays to watch now, too. Now that football is mostly over for everybody except damn Chiefs and Eagles fans. I'm not bitter.
It is weird. No, hey, listen, man, I get it. We're all getting ready to fill that void, and the wound is a little more fresh for you guys. So I can understand that. We're here to exercise these feelings out. You got to wash out the toxins. This is good.
Yes, I'm choosing to put all my energy into the offseason stuff and what's going to happen. Obviously, one of the biggest free agents for the Niners is Mike McGlinchey, someone that you obviously have been following because of the Notre Dame ties. I have a couple of questions on McGlinchey. Did you see the picture from the Cowboys game where Micah Parsons gives him the Reggie White hump move with one arm and McGlinchey is parallel to the ground?
I did see that. Yes, it's the truest axiom in sports, especially for an offensive lineman, is sometimes you get the bear and sometimes the bear gets you. We all get got, especially by great players, but damn, it's hard when it looks like that. So I felt for Mike because I love him. He's a great guy, but that's a picture that's going to be hanging on, I'd imagine, Micah Parsons' mantle for a while.
He can't ever talk trash to anyone because that picture will find him immediately. He's not a small human. He's 6'6", over 300 pounds. How does that happen to somebody that size?
Because leverage is a mother, and because Micah Parsons is the perfect combination of strong as hell, incredibly bendy around the corner. He's got that Von Miller ability to contort his body in ways that most people shouldn't, and speed. Like the mother of all problems born in any position in football, but specifically for offensive line, is once you've got to defend speed first and someone's also strong on the back end. Mike is not built like Reggie, but he's certainly strong enough to get it done, and that speed kills, and it killed on that play.
Poor Mike. What do you think the market is for him in free agency?
You know, I'll be very curious. Like, obviously, he's not going to be a market setter. I think, everyone realistically looking at it knows that. But there's also in this league, I think we're at an interesting spot right now where I've said in a number of years, because of the lack of time on field that you've got in the preseasons now, the way the college spread game has evolved, finding offensive linemen that are scheme versatile, that are used to putting their hand in the ground and getting dirty, there's still a premium to be paid there. And while, listen, it hasn't always been a perfect road for Mike, there's been a lot of ups and downs. I think he's going to be someone that certainly has plenty of suitors. And we saw his response after the game, how emotional he was about, potentially leaving San Francisco. So I'm sure that if there's a number that makes sense for everyone involved, he does seem like a guy that appreciates how special this team and organization have been and the opportunity that they've got to keep being good, which we saw a number of players over the weekend, in the locker room or outside the locker room after the Bengals game. That response from their linebacker, Pratt, about that final play from Osai was a guy who knew his contract was up. He might not be back and may not have the same opportunities to get back to the stage as he did with that Bengals organization. So I think those things always play a factor because for guys that, Mike being a first rounder, already having made a whole bunch of money and knowing he's going to get paid pretty well, there is always factoring in, well, man, if I've gotten a taste of being near the mountaintop this many times and being good this often, how much is that worth to me relative to anything else? Wouldn't begrudge anyone for taking the full value of the payday. And if Mike gets that opportunity, go off, man. You've worked hard and you deserve it. But I will be curious for a guy who is very loyal how that factors in.
I know Niner fans can get on him sometimes. I'd like to see him stay. That's a huge problem for the Niners if they're going to let him go. That's another spot they're going to have to fill with limited resources. One question about that game, because I thought that Lane Johnson was false starting like every other play. It looked like to me. Am I crazy? Or is that like the refs just allow that back foot to kind of kick out there? Maybe it's just me. You would know better than I would.
You're not crazy. I see a lot of people go through this, and I think it's just sort of a lack of, I think it's hyper focus on something because of the stage that happens all the time. At the first OTA I ever went to, the first thing we did was work on stance and start. Like in the NFL, we were down there, offensive line, getting together and working through the cadences with the quarterback. And the first thing I got told by every veteran player was, you better be jumping the snap. Like if the count is a set hut, you better be starting to move on the set, because that's how fast this league is. And that's the edge that you're looking for. So yeah, if you slow it down to the finest point, the good tackles are all going to be doing that. I'm sure if you found enough plays, Trent's probably doing the same thing. Most of these guys,
dare you? Trent Williams never makes a mistake.
It's just the reality. And so I know that became like the internet sleuthing moment of the weekend, but no, he's not offside. All of them are almost offsides every play. The tackles especially, because you got to think proximity to the football, even if you're the home team. Center and guard, you can see the ball out of your periphery. Center, you're in control. But guards, I can see the football out of my periphery. So I can kind of have that to go on. Tackles, you're a ways away. And you've got a freak athlete like a Micah Parsons on the perimeter. So when it comes to using silent counts or understanding the quarterback's cadence, you've especially got to be going off of the timing that you've drilled as a team. So for the silent count, when you see that head bob, you're like, all right, I know how long this center's supposed to go, and I know how long he's done it in practice and in pre-practice, and where I got to get the jump, because you really, if you're looking in to see the ball, you're losing a valuable seconds and on your way to potentially getting Micah Parsons if you're not trying to do that. So it's just kind of comes with the territory, and everyone got to notice it then.
That was a nice way of telling me to shut up.
You know what? I love you, Stat, so I'll be gentle here. I was a lot less kind on God's internet this weekend watching everybody pour through that, because you know what? I love when people are interested in offensive line play. I appreciate it, and that's great. But when you walk into offensive line Twitter and then you get told something you don't like, you can't just assume that we're all wrong.
Have you been on Twitter before?
Yes, far too often.
Another guy on the offensive line for the Niners is Aaron Banks. I was totally wrong on Aaron Banks. I take a massive L. I've never seen somebody go from being inactive for most of his rookie year to being an immediate starter in year 2 and crushing it like Aaron Banks did with the 49ers. Why was he inactive all year the year before? And like, I just like, what kind of improvement could he have made year 1 to year 2 to suddenly be, he's a stud.
Yeah, I mean, and Banksy, of the class of Notre Dame offensive linemen that came out when he did, Liam Eichenberg, who ended up in Miami, who ended up playing but was injured most of this year for them, and then Robert Hainsey, who ended up starting a lot at center with the injury to Ryan Jensen in Tampa Bay this year. Of the three, Banksy was by far the most physically impressive. He may not have been the most complete product, but this sort of happened at Notre Dame with him too, where in the middle of a season, he got inserted into the lineup when Notre Dame played Navy. I want to say in like 2018. And it was a little later on. He wasn't a starter at the beginning of the season, but once he got brought in there, he was the linchpin. He was that final capstone that made the whole offensive group sing. And he was a guy that had to refine his technique a little bit because he was so big and so physically gifted. He could do a lot of things, but it goes back to he has good coaching pedigree because he was coached by Harry Hiestand, who's back at Notre Dame now, who coached all those first rounders we talk about, including Mike Quinton, Ronnie Stanley, Zach Martin, all the above. So he's got the aptitude. He's got that in the background. And I think just learning how to do that at the NFL level, I think so often now we expect microwave results right away, and we don't understand that not everyone's going to do it the first time they get out there, the first year they get out there. But he's got a great teacher, being next to Trent, being on a line where Mike's been there for a while to kind of show him the ropes. And so him having success wasn't surprising, but watching the level to which he's put it together this early in year 2, really, really cool. He's realizing and putting into practical use all of that God-given ability that he has.
And it gives me a little confidence in Drake Jackson, who was basically inactive down the stretch. And Kyle Shanahan said on Wednesday he lost his power towards the end of the season because his body is essentially not where they needed it to be. You talk to guys in the league. Have you heard from guys that were rookies at the end of the year being like, damn, this is way harder and way longer than I thought?
Well, and you also have to think with rookies, like when people talk about that rookie wall, it's the sum total of events. Because think about when you get done with your college season, if you're lucky and you're one of the good guys, you go play in the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl or one of those things. And then you get started and hopefully you're going to the combine. So you're going away to one of these big box factories and you're doing nothing but preparing for that. Then you go to the combine. Then you start all these visits. Then you get drafted. Then you go to rookie minicamp. Then you go to OTAs. You're already behind the 8 ball when you walk in, and you've been going nonstop. You didn't have an off season. You've been training as hard as you can for every one of these markers along the way that's hopefully going to get the job that you want. And so by the time you get to the end of the season, you've played a longer season than you ever had in your life before that. And you're coming off probably the first time you've never had an off season in your life. And so I think that adding up always makes a lot of sense for me for rookies, and why you do see some guys struggle down the stretch, understandably.
All right. Has to be done. Quarterback time.
Yeah.
Here we go. I give you the keys to the 49ers kingdom. You get to make the decision. Who is your starting quarterback week 1 for the Niners?
I mean, it's a cop-out answer, but for me, it would be whoever wins the competition between Trey and between Brock Purdy. Like, I'd let him go at it. And I know right now there is a lot of wonder about what the feeling is on Trey Lance inside the 49ers building, what the sentiments are around him, if they have faith in him. But to me, you still spent so much to get that guy. Then unless you were going to trade him and get a king's ransom in return, I really feel like you've got to try and do what Kyle Shanahan's supposed to do and what we laud him for. Get the most out of somebody in that spot in the most quarterback solvent offense in the NFL.
I just feel like they're not being fair to Trey Lance. Essentially what I think they're doing is they're throwing him in the pool with no swimming lessons and saying, don't drown. And I just think that's absolutely nuts. The guy has 318 career passes in college. That's it for his whole career. He hasn't started and finished games in back-to-back weeks since 2019. How the hell is he supposed to come right out of the gate and start blowing people away? It's not the same as Brock Purdy. It's apples and oranges.
Well, and again, this is where what's being talked about in the building, because they've seen him and how he works every day, and they've seen how he's taken to the offense and what he's done in the practice, all the stuff that we don't get to see. But what we have of the actual stuff you're graded on, like your walking, living, breathing resume in the NFL, is the game tape. And we got one game, played in monsoon. Like, how are we supposed to render a judgment off of that has always been my sort of rallying cry with this. So I agree with you. And again, if now all of a sudden you're out, that's a failure in the way that you've gone about and evaluated this, because all the things that you just mentioned, we knew about Trey before the draft, and the sell was supposed to be incredible physical ability, worked in an offense that was play action heavy, that made use of multiple tight ends and fullbacks the way that San Francisco does, and football aptitude that we heard about leading up to the draft. This guy from the neck up was someone that everyone thought really had some good stuff. And so if now all of a sudden that's not true on the other side, what does that say about the way that they've gone about evaluating this player in getting it potentially that wrong? That's why I don't believe that, based on how good a job the 49ers have done at so many different positions. And so I'm inclined to say it's time for them to buckle down and do the work. The injury stuff is absolutely a problem, but this is what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch staked their reputation on. This is what happens. The clock starts when you draft or when you go after a high-profile free agent at quarterback, and the clock is ticking now for those guys. They're just as culpable in this.
You look at the whole of how the 49ers have handled the quarterback situation. Kyle Shanahan admitted they didn't properly scout Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson because they wanted Kirk Cousins. That goes on your coaching tombstone forever. They signed Jimmy Garoppolo to the biggest contract ever after 5 games. They stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo instead of going to Tom Brady in 2020. And now we have Trey Lance, who they gave up 3 first-round picks plus 4, who might never end up starting for them because they have Brock Purdy, the guy they picked last in the draft. That is not exactly an endorsement of how they handle the quarterback. And by the way, they didn't play Brock Purdy over Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Brock was better than Jimmy, and they would never have known that if Garoppolo didn't get hurt again. So when you look at their handling of the quarterback, it doesn't exactly fill you with a bunch of confidence.
Yeah, it sounds like Kyle Shanahan has a weird kink. Like he just kind of enjoys, guys that are about ability-wise pretty average. And maybe some of that is believing that with a more blank canvas, the great artist, can create a masterpiece, which Kyle has. That's the thing, is the results being borne out have indicated this guy kind of knows what he's doing to a certain extent. I mean, again, we're having all of this wailing and gnashing of teeth right now. If Brock Purdy just stays healthy through that game, there's a very real chance we're talking about the Niners playing this week. So it's not that far away in the way it's happened, but you're right. It's almost happened by accident. Like, you only get so much credit for scouting a guy that you take last in the draft. Like, how many times did you pass? Those are flyers. Those are, hey, one scout really likes a guy and he's kind of able to convince the rest of the room of it. And what's the worst that happens? We're not paying him much guaranteed money. And if he sucks, we can cut him. Like, you don't get a ton of credit for striking gold. You get a little bit for understanding, well, the sell probably was, hey, he operated, like we said with Trey, he operated an offense that was very similar in a lot of ways. He was a multi-year starter in college. He brings all that experience, but only so much. So yeah, some of it seems like it happens a little bit by accident to that point, and then the rest is that you've managed to scout and build an incredibly diverse roster in so many important positions, and you've got probably the best play caller in football.
Well, I just want to thank you for putting the phrase Kyle Shanahan has a weird kink into my brain for all time. I think that's probably where we should end this thing. Thank you, Mike. Again, the Gojo podcast. You're going to Arizona. You are going to have I think I saw like 6 hours of programming that you are going to record while you're down there. Are you going to sleep at all?
You know what? Sleep is for after the season is over here. Super Bowl week, as you well know, is for burning the candle at both ends. I'm going to be trying to sneak into Gronk Beach and try and go guest DJ at Shaq's party and live my life while we try and pump out some great content. We're excited about it. It'll be fun to be boots on the ground out there. It's a great time.
Definitely check that out. There's going to be a ton of massive, massive guests all week long. Mike, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dads.